At dawn, Detective Marcus Harrell stepped around pooled rainwater behind the old shipping docks, the tang of rust and decay heavy in the air. 2 victims lay sprawled beneath a sagging loading ramp, framed by the crumbling warehouse wall streaked with rust and mildew. The air reeked of damp wood and decay, mingling with the metallic tang of blood pooling around their mutilated bodies. Nearby, jagged shards of broken crates and twisted chains added to the scene's desolation, as if the setting itself recoiled from the brutality on display. Each had been torn open, organs spilled like grotesque ornaments. A forensic tech took photographs in grim silence. No one was joking. No one was making small talk. These scenes had become too frequent. Detective Sonia Alvarez crouched low, pulling a plastic sheet carefully over one victim's hand. His fingernails were cracked, caked with blood and dirt. "He tried to fight back," she said, voice quiet. "They usually do." She released the sheet and stood, hugging her arms. What could do this? The wounds, they're all wrong. Not blades, not bullets, something else. Marcus nodded. He'd seen all manner of cruelty in his 20 years, but this set of murders, 4 in a month, confounded them. Some of the gashes were too ragged, as though inflicted by talons rather than tools. He wanted to come up with a logical culprit. A deranged killer with custom weapons, maybe. But that didn't explain the animalistic patterns, the sheer savagery. Sonia's gaze swept the scene. "We're missing something," she said. "None of these victims had reason to be here. They weren't locals, had no known ties to the area, and their belongings suggest they were heading somewhere else entirely. Yet they all ended up here, in this forgotten part of the city. Why?" Her tone sharpened. "All of them ended up in remote, neglected parts of the city, places where fewer eyes would notice." She glanced at Marcus with unease. "There's something unsettling about how they all came to be here." He said nothing, only turned to watch the hazy sky lighten over rooftops crowned with twisted metal. If it was a person, they were dealing with an unimaginably vicious psychopath. If it wasn't a person, he pushed the thought aside. The team packed up, the crime scene tape fluttering weakly against a rising breeze. Back at the precinct, Sonia pored over old case files. The department's cramped archives smelled of mildew and old coffee, the stale air thick with dust motes swirling in the dim fluorescent light. Rows of leaning shelves groaned under the weight of forgotten files, their edges curled and stained with age. A faint rustling of paper and the occasional creak of wood punctuated the oppressive silence. Marcus stood behind her, shoulders tense, as she flipped through a folder of cold cases. She paused on an old photograph, a mutilated corpse found near the drainage canals 6 years back. The wounds looked eerily similar. "I remember hearing rumors," she said. "Back then, the detective in charge, Lopez, I think, claimed the killer wasn't human." People rolled their eyes. Eventually, the murders stopped. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. "And now they've started again." He scanned the reports. Mention of footprints too large and misshapen to match any known animal. Scattered sightings of something moving too fast for the witnesses to describe. He tapped the page. All near damp areas, abandoned docks, flooded basements, old drainage tunnels. "Sounds like a habitat," Sonia said grimly. "As if it needs these environments. Maybe it thrives in rot and moisture." Marcus suppressed a shiver. "We need leads," he said. "Let's talk to the patrol officers working the midnight shifts. Someone must have seen something." They corralled a few uniforms into the briefing room. Officer Daniels, nervous fingers tapping his belt. Officer Reyes, jaw clenched tight. And Officer Kim, arms folded, her mouth a thin line. These 3 had patrolled the neglected fringes of the city for months. "We hear rumors," Daniels said, barely above a whisper. His fingers fidgeted with his belt, his gaze darting to the floor. "Some folks sleeping rough say there's something that crawls out of old sewer grates at night." His voice trembled slightly, betraying the nervous energy he tried to suppress. "At first we thought it was just another drug-induced hallucination, but then we heard it ourselves." Reyes nodded. Heard it behind that condemned train station. A scraping. A kind of growl, but not a dog, not even close. He swallowed. We found deep scratches on a metal door frame. No animal I know can carve steel like that. Kim just shook her head. We shine a flashlight, it's gone. No footprints in the mud, at least none we can follow. Just weird impressions like splayed claws. Sonia offered a reassuring nod. Keep this quiet, she said. We're on it. As they left, Marcus caught a glimpse of Daniels rubbing a small St. Christopher medal between his thumb and forefinger. The officers were on edge, and that said a lot. They saw enough human brutality to be inured to fear. Whatever lurked out there had them praying for daylight. Night spread over the city. Sonia and Marcus followed a fresh tip. An anonymous caller claimed to have seen something hunched and massive slinking around an abandoned waterfront district. The buildings here leaned into each other, splintered wood and peeled paint reflecting faint moonlight. The smell of rot, oil, and salt water hung heavy. They moved through cavernous halls piled with broken crates and chains that clanked when the wind stirred. Marcus stopped, heart thudding. A faint rasping sound echoed from the far end of a storage bay. The beam of his flashlight caught a shape. It unfurled, rising unnaturally tall, gaunt limbs corded with muscle under ashen skin. Red eyes flashed back at them. Before Marcus could call out, the thing rushed forward with impossible speed. Sonia fired twice, the shots thunderous. Sparks danced off metal beams. The creature hissed, recoiling, but only for a second. Its head swiveled as if searching for weakness. It leapt sideways, clinging to a wall, then bounded overhead and vanished through a gap in the roof. They sprinted outside, breathing hard, but it was gone. Marcus shone his light along the brick walls. It reacted to the gunshots, he said. But it didn't seem wounded. Sonia's voice trembled slightly. It's something else. Not just an animal. She glanced down at a damp patch near the building's foundation. Moss and algae spread over broken pavement. It's drawn to places like this, nesting where rot and moisture pool. She looked at him, eyes wide. Maybe it needs these conditions to survive. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow. The encounter had shaken him deeply. We need more firepower, he said quietly, and backup that believes what we saw. They drove back without speaking. The image of that figure, elongated limbs, hungry eyes, lodged in their minds like a barbed hook. The next day, Captain Miller listened, arms crossed. You want more men? More weapons? Based on what? Sonia passed him an evidence bag, a splinter of material caught on her bullet casing, dark and fibrous, not quite hair, not quite hide. Lab can't identify it. It's not human. Whatever this is, it resists bullets and moves faster than anything we've seen. They selected Daniels, Reyes, and Kim. They'd seen signs. They wouldn't question the mission's sincerity. Add 2 more veterans. O'Leary, who always kept a lucky coin in his vest pocket, and Fraser, who once cornered a sniper on a rooftop and talked him down. They were steady hands, each bringing their own quiet confidence and dread. That night, armed with rifles and heavy flashlights, they returned to the waterfront. With no sign of the creature above ground, Sonia and Marcus searched for access points to the underbelly of the city. Behind a stack of rotting pallets, they found a rusted hatch embedded in the concrete. With effort, they pried it open. A damp gust rushed out, carrying the scent of stagnant water and old earth. They descended into darkness, flashlights slicing through the gloom. The corridor stretched into a maze of brickwork, dripping pipes, and moss-grown walls. Footsteps splashed in shallow puddles. They came upon a chamber where the floor had collapsed into a watery hollow. Bones littered the perimeter, human and animal. Twisted ribs and skulls scattered as if arranged by chaotic appetite. Daniels gagged. Reyes's jaw muscles twitched. Kim whispered a prayer. O'Leary palmed his lucky coin. Fraser squared his shoulders, muttering, "Sweet Mother Mary." In the silence, a scraping sound, something was here. The flashlight swept around, catching a flash of movement in an alcove. The creature emerged, hissing softly. Its eyes glowed brighter now, limbs quivering. Marcus realized it looked leaner than before. Perhaps the wounds from bullets had taken some toll. Good. Maybe they could finish it. They focused their beams directly on it. The thing shrank from the glare, raising an arm to shield its face. Sonia fired, the bullet striking home. A thick, oily fluid oozed. It snarled, lunging forward. Fraser and O'Leary cut it off, their shots echoing. The creature veered, leaping onto a side ledge. Daniels aimed at its eyes and it shrieked, rattled by the concentrated light and gunfire. It roared, a sound of fury and desperation. Marcus advanced slowly, rifle steady. "Keep the lights on it," he shouted. "It hates the light." The creature tried to rush him but slipped on wet stone, falling into the water with a splash. Another volley of bullets hammered into its flank. It writhed, scuttling over jagged debris. Then it did something unexpected. It reached for an overhead pipe, trying to climb up and out. As it strained, Marcus glimpsed something behind it, a mound of gelatinous sacks, half submerged. Eggs. The realization stunned him. This wasn't a random killing spree. It was feeding, preparing a nursery in the city's veins. If they hadn't come, an entire brood might have emerged. Suddenly, the creature let out a guttural roar and swung its limb with unexpected force, shattering a nearby overhead light. The chamber was momentarily plunged into flickering shadows, the creature using the dimness to dart closer. It slashed at a crumbling pipe, releasing a spray of scalding steam, forcing the team to scatter. The unexpected maneuver left them momentarily vulnerable. Sonia saw it too. Her eyes hardened. "We need to kill it now." She aimed at the cluster, and the creature screamed as if understanding her intent. It leapt down, barreling into Kim, who fired a shot into its chest. O'Leary rushed forward, shoving it back, only to take a slash across his shoulder. He cried out, stumbling, lucky coin clattering to the ground. The creature snarled, but its strength was fading. Marcus and Reyes fired together, bullets ripping through sinew. It collapsed onto a protruding length of rebar. Sonia hesitated, then shot again. The creature's shriek rattled the chamber, echoing down corridors. It thrashed, black fluid staining the water, growing weaker with each second. As it died, a tremor shuddered through the tunnel system. Pipes groaned. A distant splash and rumble suggested some old masonry giving way. The officers exchanged nervous looks. Sonia stepped forward, shining her light on the creature's face. Its eyes dimmed, lips curling back to reveal teeth like splintered bone. Marcus aimed at the egg clutch and fired. The sacks ruptured, their contents spilling into the murky pool. The creature let out a final rasping moan, as if mourning its brood, then fell limp. A hush fell over them, broken only by the drip of water and O'Leary's labored breathing. Daniels helped him wrap a makeshift bandage around his arm, his hands trembling slightly as he glanced repeatedly at his St. Christopher medal, now smudged with sweat and dirt. Kim shone her flashlight around, her lips moving in a whispered prayer as though clinging to it as a shield against the oppressive dread. It was nesting, she said softly. Not just killing for sport. Reyes looked pale. If we hadn't found this place, what would have happened to the city? He didn't want the answer, and no one offered one. They stood there, rifles lowered, ears still ringing from gunshots. Marcus felt no triumph, just a hollow relief. "Let's get out of here," he said, voice low. They retraced their steps, careful over wet stone. Another distant rumble shivered through the old infrastructure. Perhaps killing the creature had disturbed something. Cracks spidered along the walls. The city's foundations had endured a century of neglect. Maybe their firefight had shaken loose old secrets. Marcus wondered if somewhere deeper underground, there were more tunnels, more nests waiting. He forced the thought away. Upstairs, dawn washed over the deserted waterfront. The officers emerged grim and silent, their faces etched with exhaustion and haunted by the night's events. Daniels clutched his St. Christopher medal tightly, his lips moving in a barely audible prayer. Kim hesitated at the threshold, glancing back at the darkness below as if expecting something to follow. Reyes exhaled heavily, his clenched fists finally relaxing. Marcus looked at Sonia, whose gaze was fixed on the horizon, her jaw set, but her eyes betraying a lingering unease. Each carried their own silent burden as they stepped into the light, unsure if the horrors they had witnessed were truly over. Miller wouldn't get a neat explanation. They'd say it was a deranged killer holed up below, that they'd destroyed the lair and ended the threat. The truth would remain in that wet darkness, along with shattered eggs and a body that would be hard to explain. They returned to the precinct. Sonia sat at her desk, fingers hovering over her report form. How do you describe something so alien, its motives both bestial and maternal? She settled on describing what they'd found, a disturbed predator feeding and nesting underground. But the words felt inadequate. Marcus drifted over, shoulders sore, watching her type. Neither said much. Daniels paced by the coffee machine, still rattled but alive. Reyes leaned against a window, staring at the sunrise. Kim scribbled in her notebook, perhaps her own private record of what happened. O'Leary, arm bandaged, flipped his lucky coin over and over, wordless. Fraser sat hunched, his mind distant. No one laughed or celebrated. They were relieved, yes, but changed. The city outside looked the same, cars honking, people heading to work, but they knew the fragile world beneath their feet. The hidden places thick with grime and secrets had nearly birthed something monstrous. In the following days, life returned to a tense normality. The murders stopped. Headlines credited the police with halting a serial killer. Captain Miller shook their hands, but never asked for the full truth. The mayor praised their heroic efforts on television, though he'd never understand the horrors below. Sonia and Marcus met at a quiet bar near the station. They clinked their glasses in silence. The memory of the creature, that underground lair, and those eggs weighed heavily between them. There was no neat closure. They'd prevented a catastrophe, but now knew their city was layered with secrets that defied easy explanations. Marcus eyed the condensation on his glass. We stopped it, but what if it wasn't alone? What if something else slithers through the old pipes, just waiting? Sonia looked toward the window. Night had fallen. The streetlights hummed. I don't know, she said softly. I guess we keep watch. She offered a faint, sad smile. They had done what they could, sealed one crack in the dam, but the darkness beneath the city's skin lingered, as old and patient as the sewers themselves. No formal coda would come. The world wouldn't end tonight, but they understood how thin the veil truly was. Outside, sirens wailed far off. Life went on. Yet Sonia and Marcus knew, as they sipped their drinks in uneasy silence, that the foundations of the city were never as solid as everyone liked to pretend. Something had stirred, and even though it lay dead beneath the concrete, its presence had changed them, leaving a question echoing in their minds. What else might lie beneath?